They were just about to close the casket when I felt someone lean in close behind me. Madison, my daughter-in-law, whispered softly in my ear, "You have a week to get out." I sat there stiff as a board, still holding the funeral program in my lap. My fingers had crushed one of the corners without even realizing it. I didn't turn around. I didn't react. I just kept staring straight ahead, pretending I hadn't heard her. The priest was talking about peace and closure, but none of that felt real to me. My son, Aaron, just 33 years old, was gone. A heart attack, out of nowhere. He was the only person who truly cared about me, and now I was sitting next to his casket, barely holding myself together, while Madison put on a show in her fancy black dress, fake tears and all. She gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze after whispering those cold words, like she was trying to comfort me. I didn't move. Before the service started, someone reminded everyone to like and subscribe, and to share a life lesson in the comments, something worth knowing before it's too late. But all I could think was, too late for what? For who? Later, she got up and went to greet someone else with a sweet smile, like none of it had just happened. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "She's been so strong. Losing her husband at that age? I can't even imagine." I almost laughed, but instead, my chest just burned. I stayed quiet through the entire service, through the prayers, even when people started walking toward the reception hall. When it was time to leave, Madison made a point to help her grandmother to the car, but left me standing alone. I rode with her in Aaron's car. She didn't say a single word. The smell of his cologne still lingered, and I thought that might break me. But I couldn't even cry, I was too busy trying to figure out what she was up to. Back at the house, Madison welcomed everyone in like the perfect hostess. She stood in front of everyone and gave a speech about how funny and strong Aaron was, how much he loved his family. I stayed by the kitchen island and didn't say a word. She handed out wine, made a toast, hugged people like she was the star of some sad movie. But I noticed the little things. The family photo by the stairs was missing, and Aaron's military medal box was gone. She was already erasing him from the house. After everyone left, I went to my room, the same one I'd lived in for 7 years. The door was wide open. My blankets were folded, the lamp was unplugged, and when I checked the dresser, half the drawers were empty. My jewelry box was missing. The closet had a few boxes stacked inside, labeled Mom's stuff. I just stood there, confused. It took a moment for my brain to catch up. I walked out into the kitchen. Madison was sitting at the dining table with a glass of wine and her phone. She didn't even look up. I cleared my throat. "Did you move my things?" She finally looked at me and said, "I was just organizing. I can call a moving company when you're ready." She smiled like she was being helpful. I asked where my jewelry was. She said, "Some of it's in the safe. You wouldn't want to lose anything with all the people coming and going." "I didn't ask you to touch my stuff," I told her. She took another sip of wine. "Aaron and I talked about this," she said. "It's not personal. We just assumed you'd want to move back to your sister's." "I don't have a sister. She knows that." "This is my home," I said. She gave a little shrug. It was his home. He would have wanted us to have space to grieve. Then she picked up her phone and started scrolling like I wasn't even there. I left the room before I said something I'd regret. Back in my room, I checked the drawers again, trying to stay calm. I looked under the bed for a box I always kept there, but it was gone. I opened the closet and saw a plastic bin labeled Old Docs. I pulled it out and dug through it, receipts, old mail, warranties. Then I found my folder with medical records, bank info, and my passport. But the house deed, the one with my name on it, wasn't there. I checked twice. That paper was supposed to be right there. Aaron made sure we kept it together when they bought this house. I helped with the down payment when he lost his job. That paper mattered. From down the hall, I heard Madison call out, "Hey, do you want leftover salad or should I toss it?" I didn't answer. My hand was shaking. The deed was gone. The next morning, the kitchen was quiet. The smell of coffee was already gone. Madison sat at the table typing on her laptop, calm as ever. "Morning," she said. "Just getting a few quotes for movers." I opened the fridge. My labeled containers were gone, replaced with neat rows of Tupperware that weren't mine. "I didn't ask for movers," I said. She smiled without even looking at me. "Right, but you said you," and then she just kept typing. She took a sip from her mug and clicked something on her laptop without looking at me. "I just thought helping you stick to your own timeline might make things easier," she said, as if this whole situation was just some casual favor. I walked into the living room and stopped. Aaron's old recliner, the one he loved, was gone. In its place was some stiff-looking leather chair that didn't even look real. His favorite blanket had been shoved behind the TV stand, crumpled up like an old dog bed. "Where's Aaron's recliner?" I asked. She shrugged. It was old. Didn't match the room anymore. I stared at her. It's only been a week. She looked annoyed. It's been 9 days. I'm not going to sit in a dead man's chair, Ellen. That was the first time she said his name. And the way she said it, like it meant nothing, hit me like a slap. I couldn't stay in that house another second. I turned and walked outside, just needing to breathe. I sat on the porch steps, pulled out my phone, and called a lawyer Aaron had once recommended when we were updating our wills. His secretary said he could see me that same afternoon. I didn't tell Madison. I just left. The lawyer, Mr. Holt, remembered Aaron right away. Solid guy, he said. I told him everything. How Madison said I had to leave. How my name had been on the deed. How the document had mysteriously vanished. How long have you lived there, he asked. 7 years. Since they bought the house. Do you have any proof you helped with the down payment? I used a cashier's check. I think I still have the receipt. His eyes lit up. Then we may have something. He explained that if my name was on the deed and I had proof I contributed to the purchase, Madison couldn't legally force me out, not without a fight. He told me to find that cashier's check and, if I could, the original purchase documents. I thanked him and drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel. I was shaking. When I walked through the door, Madison was on the phone, pacing the hallway. No, she doesn't know anything, she whispered. Then, when she saw me, she lowered her voice even more. It's handled. I walked right past her and went up to the attic. Aaron used to keep old boxes up there, school files, tax stuff, old paperwork. My heart pounded as I pulled box after box into the light. Dust filled the air. Then I saw it, a box labeled Home Purchase. I grabbed it, dropped to the floor, and started digging through it. Closing statements. Home insurance. Loan approvals. And then, there it was. A manila envelope marked, Final Deed. I opened it. And there it was, my name. My signature. Aaron's. The document was dated, notarized, and officially filed. I just sat there for a second, holding it in my hands. She had been bluffing. Maybe she didn't know about the deed. Or maybe she was just hoping I didn't. I slid the folder into my coat and climbed down the ladder. Madison was waiting at the bottom. Looking for something? She asked, her eyebrows raised. I looked her right in the eyes. Just some old paperwork. Nothing important. She smiled, tight-lipped. That's good. I wouldn't want you to get stressed. Then she turned and walked off toward the kitchen like we hadn't just had a silent war. That night, I made copies of the deed. Scanned it into my email. Created a folder labeled, For Lawyer Only. She thought she was ahead. But now I had something she didn't expect. I just needed to play it smart. Around 9 p.m., she came into the room with 2 glasses of wine. I figured we should talk, she said. Clear the air. I took the glass but didn't drink. Okay. She sat on the couch across from me. I know things have been tense, she started. But Aaron always said this house was for us, for our future family. I didn't say a word. She stared at her wine. I don't want this to get ugly. I just want to move forward. I glanced at her hand. She was still wearing her wedding ring. You understand, right? She asked. I looked at her and said, Have you spoken to a lawyer? Her face twitched. No. I didn't think it was necessary. I smiled. Maybe it is. Her eyes narrowed. She took a slow sip. Are you threatening me, Ellen? I smiled again. No. Just thinking out loud. She stood up slowly. I hope we can do this the easy way. So do I. She walked down the hall, still holding her wine glass. As soon as she disappeared, I pulled out my phone and checked the scanned deed again. My name, clear as day. She thought she had backed me into a corner. But she had no idea what I'd just found upstairs. The next morning, I printed 2 copies of the deed. I placed them in a sealed envelope. On the front, I wrote, For my lawyer. The lawyer's name was Mr. Holt. I dropped the sealed envelope off at his office without calling ahead. His assistant looked up, and I just said, It's time sensitive, then walked out before she could ask any questions. Back at the house, Madison was in the garage, clearing shelves like she was already done grieving. She glanced up as I pulled in. Hey, she said casually. Just getting rid of junk. Hope that's okay. I nodded, walking past her into the house, pretending not to notice that Aaron's fishing gear was missing. Gone, just like that. In my room, I went to the top drawer of my nightstand. It didn't open. That drawer had never had a lock. I grabbed a flathead screwdriver from the kitchen and forced it open. Inside, my prescription bottle was gone. So was my small envelope of emergency cash. She was sending a message. A warning. I wasn't welcome here anymore. And I had no privacy. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed through my teeth until the tight burn in my chest started to ease. Then I got up and walked into Aaron's office. I hadn't touched anything in here since the funeral. I opened the filing cabinet. Third drawer down, a folder labeled refinance options. Inside were newer mortgage statements, dated less than a year ago, with both our names on them. Madison's name wasn't there. Not on any page. Not even after the refinance. That mattered. I took photos and backed them up to my cloud drive. Then I heard Madison's voice in the hallway. She was on speakerphone with someone. Yeah, she's still here. I know it's awkward, but she doesn't have any real claim. A pause. Then, no, her name's not on the current utilities or tax bills. It'll be fine. I stepped into the hallway just loud enough for her to hear me. She turned fast, eyes wide. Everything okay? You really should be careful what you say in this house, I said. The walls are thin. Then I turned and made coffee. Calm, casual. She stayed out of my way the rest of the day. Around 6 p.m., I walked past the living room and noticed she'd taken down the family portrait. In its place was a print of some blue-gray mountains in the snow. No people. No warmth. Just cold distance. That night, she ordered Chinese food and left mine in the takeout bag on the counter. No note. No courtesy. I took it, closed my door, and locked it from the inside using the little door wedge I'd kept since the week Aaron died. I wasn't taking any more chances. At 2 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my room. Slow. Careful. I got up, pressed my ear to the door. No knock. Just a long pause. Then retreating steps down the hall. The next morning, my alarm clock was flashing. Power had gone out for exactly 1 minute. I checked the circuit breaker. Everything was fine. I said nothing to her at breakfast. She offered me coffee like nothing had happened. I declined. Then I went back to Mr. Holt. This time, I sat across from him and handed over the photos, the deed copies, and the refinance documents. He reviewed everything, his head nodding with each new page. She has no legal standing, he said. Her name never appears. You've contributed financially and lived there continuously for over 7 years. If she tries to evict you, she'll lose. Can I file preemptively? I asked. He nodded. We'll draft a formal notice of shared ownership. And prepare a legal response in case she tries anything. If she serves you with anything, we respond immediately. What's my risk? I asked. Only if you lose the documents. Keep them safe. And stay calm. I drove home differently that time. Not afraid. Not grieving. Just focused. When I walked in, Madison was folding laundry on the couch. She looked up. Did you go somewhere? Just needed fresh air. She raised an eyebrow. You seem confident all of a sudden. I smiled. I just remembered something important. She stared at me for a beat, then said, well, I hope it doesn't make things harder. I opened the fridge. My labeled food was back. Same handwriting. That night, I heard her in the guest room on the phone again. Yeah, she's acting weird. I might need to move up the timeline. A pause. If she finds that file, we're screwed. She didn't know I already had the file. She didn't know it was already with a lawyer. But now I knew one thing. For certain, this wasn't just about a house. She was hiding something deeper. Something bigger. And I was about to find out what. 3 days later, Madison called it a grief gathering, like it was some casual get-together. She mentioned it over coffee one morning, just tossing it out there like she was planning a birthday brunch. Just a little closure, she said, pouring almond milk into her mug and ignoring the extra cup I had set out for her. She didn't ask me to help with anything, which was fine. Honestly, she barely spoke to me that whole week, except to remind me to keep the guest bathroom clean and not to talk about personal stuff with anyone. I didn't argue. I just stayed quiet. But I watched. I watched her drag out Aaron's old bar cart and load it like she was hosting a happy hour, not mourning someone we'd just buried. I watched her line the kitchen counter with fancy snacks, mini quiches, imported crackers, like everything was perfectly normal. The first person showed up around 6. It was Kyle, Aaron's buddy from work. He gave me a long hug and whispered, "He talked about you all the time. Said you were the one person he could always count on." I just nodded, trying not to cry. More people came in after that. Neighbors, coworkers, some of Madison's Pilates friends. Some I knew, some I didn't. Madison floated around the room with a wine glass in hand, giving little speeches about how kind and bright Aaron was. I stood by the back wall, quietly watching her smile at people while pretending she hadn't just cleaned out Aaron's room and thrown away his books like he'd never been there. At one point, someone asked how I was doing. I said, as well as I can be, considering I still live here. She looked confused, so I added, Aaron and I co-own the house. Madison's handling everything now, but I still live here. Her eyebrows went up. Oh. I thought she said it was hers. I gave her a small smile. Easy mistake. About an hour later, I noticed Madison staring at me from across the room. She was still smiling, but her eyes were different, tight, almost calculating. When things quieted down, she came over and said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I followed her into the hallway. She closed the door behind us and asked, "Are you trying to start something?" I replied, "I just answered a question. Honestly." She stepped closer. "Don't play cute, Ellen. These people don't need to hear about paperwork." I crossed my arms. "Then stop lying about it." She stared at me, then smoothed her tone. "Look, this is sensitive. These people loved Aaron. They're here for me." I said, "Then maybe don't throw a wine party in the house you're erasing him from." Her cheeks turned red. "If you don't want to be here, you're free to leave." I smiled. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere." She leaned in, whispering just like she did at the funeral. "You think you're clever, Ellen. But you have no idea how this works. I'll make sure you regret staying." Then she walked out, all polite smiles again, greeting the next guest like we hadn't just exchanged threats in the hallway. The rest of the night, I stayed quiet. I watched, I listened. One guest caught my attention, a man in his 40s, shaved head, wearing an expensive coat. He kept glancing at me like he was trying to figure out who I was. I saw him speak briefly with Madison near the hallway, then he left early. Something about how he moved, low-key, careful, stuck with me. Later that night, after everyone had gone and Madison was cleaning up in silence, I walked past the guest room and noticed a manila folder in her open tote bag. It wasn't there before. I stepped back into my room, grabbed my phone, and quietly snapped a photo through the crack in the door. The folder was labeled "Doc Copies Backup Plan." When I heard her get into the shower, I made my move. I slipped into the hallway, opened the tote, and found several folders inside. One said House Timeline, another read E-Signatures 2023. I didn't take anything, I just took pictures. One folder had a screenshot of a will with a digital signature I didn't recognize. It said filed March 4th. But Aaron died on February 2nd. He couldn't have signed anything in March. I stood there frozen, holding my breath, until I heard the water shut off. I closed the bag quickly, slipped back into my room, and waited as she passed by, humming softly, wrapped in a robe. My hands were still shaking. But now I had more than just suspicions. I had proof, real proof, that she was trying to take control of everything. Something much bigger was going on, and the next day, I was going to find out what exactly this E-Signatures 2023 folder was really about. The next morning, I woke up to the soft sound of someone crying in the kitchen, not big, messy sobs, just light, quiet sniffles. She was crying quietly, just loud enough that I'd hear her. When I walked into the kitchen, Madison was standing at the sink in her robe, holding a crumpled tissue and staring out the window like something out of a soap opera. But the second she saw me, she turned around, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and gave me this forced little smile, like she was trying to be strong for someone. "I'm sorry," she said. "Sometimes it just hits me all over again." Then she placed her hand on her stomach, not in a dramatic way, but just enough for me to notice. I froze. That was new. She looked up at me and said gently, I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. "I'm pregnant, Ellen." For 5 full seconds, I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. None of it made sense, not after everything I'd seen, and especially not the timing. So I asked, "How far along?" She answered right away. 8 weeks. Maybe 9. And that's when everything clicked. Aaron had been dead for 10. I stared at her, trying to keep my face still, trying not to let the alarm inside me show. Then she pulled out a sonogram photo and placed it on the table like it was some kind of winning card. I picked it up, turned it slowly, looking closely. In the corner was her name, the clinic, and the date, clearly printed. Not 10 weeks ago. Just 4. That's when I knew, this pregnancy had nothing to do with Aaron. It had everything to do with control. She said, "I used a donor. Aaron. And I had talked about it, just in case. He wanted me to have a part of him." But I knew that wasn't true. Aaron would have told me something that important. I looked at her but said nothing. Just handed the photo back. She added, "I hope you understand now why I need stability. For the baby's sake." And that's when I saw what she was doing. She was building a story one people would believe. A grieving widow. A baby on the way. And stuck living with her unstable mother-in-law. Something she could use in court if it ever came to that. I nodded slowly and said, "That changes things." Her whole face softened. She really thought I was buying it. Like her little act had worked. But the moment she left the room, I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken of the documents in her bag. I compared the sonogram date to the one on the file labeled e-signatures 2023. They were 4 days apart. Both from the same week. Both planted like pieces of a puzzle she was building. I forwarded them to Mr. Holt with a short message: "We need to talk." He called me back within the hour. "This actually helps us," he said. "If she's claiming emotional hardship, we can request full medical records and check the timeline." I asked, "What if she made the whole thing up?" He said, "Then it's fraud. And if you keep documenting everything calmly, we'll win before it even goes to trial." "She's trying to bait me into reacting," I told him. "Then don't," he said. So I didn't. I stayed quiet. I cleaned the bathroom. Folded laundry. Smiled politely when Madison said things like, "This baby's going to need a lot of space," or, "It's going to be hard raising a child in a hostile environment." Each time she said something like that, she looked at me out of the corner of her eye, like she was measuring how close I was to snapping. But I just nodded, said nothing, and kept my calm. Until Friday. That's when someone slid an envelope under my door. It was a manila folder marked urgent, 48 hours notice. Inside was a typed document, not from the court, saying I had 48 hours to move out because of emotional instability and personal threats. I just sat there, staring at it. My heart was pounding, not because I was scared, but because it was so obvious, so sloppy. She'd handed me a lie I could take apart with one email. Then I saw the last line on the page, and it made my skin crawl. "Failure to vacate will result in law enforcement involvement and potential elder neglect claims." That was it. That was the card she'd decided to play. She was going to try to paint me as some dangerous old woman, unstable, unfit, maybe even abusive, even though all I'd done was make toast and fold towels. Now she was trying to push me out, hoping I'd panic and run before I fought back. But I knew what I had to do now. I couldn't wait for her to mess up again. She already had. I didn't say a word. I just folded the fake eviction notice, slid it into a new folder with all the other proof I'd gathered, and got ready. I took all the documents Madison had so conveniently handed me over the past 2 weeks, slid them into a folder, and drove straight to Mr. Holt's office. No appointment. No delay. Because this wasn't just about defending my right to live in the house anymore, this was about tearing apart the fantasy world she was trying to build. When I sat across from him and handed over the latest file, he scanned it quickly. His eyes paused on the final line, and he let out a dry chuckle, not because it was funny, but because he couldn't believe it. "She's threatening you with elder neglect," he said, shaking his head. "While you're the one being emotionally harassed, financially manipulated, and gaslight, documented." I told him everything. The fake pregnancy timeline. The IVF clinic label. The donor date that didn't add up. The sonogram photo. The late-night phone calls I overheard. The conversations I baited her into, always calmly, never raising my voice. When I was done, he looked serious. "We're past civil conflict now," he said. "This is pre-fraud litigation territory. And if she's forged financial documents, or used your identity in any way, this could turn criminal." I asked, "What's the fastest way to prove it?" "We request a discovery subpoena," he said. "Digital records. Emails. Text logs. Medical submissions. Banking history." I hesitated. Would a judge even allow that? If we show them the fake eviction notice, the pregnancy inconsistencies, and how she misrepresented the deed, he said, we don't just have a case, we have leverage. And that was the first time since Aaron died that I didn't feel like I was just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. I was flipping the script on the woman who thought she could rewrite me out of my own life. On the way home, I stopped at a print shop and ordered 3 bound copies of everything: the deed with my name, the refinance record, the ultrasound photo with the false date, the fake eviction threat, a list of every person who had heard her try to rewrite the history of our home during the grief gathering. I labeled the binder case file, Madison. 1 copy went into my lawyer's office, 1 into my safe deposit box, and 1 I hid under the floorboard in my closet, where she'd never find it, not even if she tore the whole house apart. That night, when I got home, Madison was in the kitchen, on a video call with a headset on, laughing. She was talking to someone about a new real estate opportunity and said, "Yeah, I'll have access to the place in 2 weeks, tops." I stopped. In the hallway, frozen. She wasn't just trying to win the house out of grief or fear. She was flipping it. Planning to sell it. This place wasn't even her future, just her leverage. I stepped into the room, made sure she saw me, and walked to the fridge. Took out a water bottle. Just stared at her in silence until she finally ended her call. Then she turned to me slowly and said, "Do you need something?" "Just a heads up," I replied, calm and clear. "If another envelope shows up at my door, make sure it's court-stamped. Anything less goes straight to my attorney." She blinked fast, like I'd slapped her. Are you threatening me now? No, I said. You started the paperwork. War, Madison. I'm just keeping mine legal. Then I walked away, before she could say another word. That night, I did one last thing. I logged into Aaron's old email account. Years ago, when I helped him with job applications, he'd given me the password. I still remembered it, his favorite song lyric plus his service number. It worked. Most of the inbox was just boring stuff, applications, bills, newsletters. But then I saw it. A flagged folder marked estate. Inside were a few PDFs. One caught my eye, Draft Will, February 2023. I opened it and stopped breathing. The signature at the bottom wasn't his. The notary seal had clearly been cropped and reused. Worst of all, the will listed Madison as the sole heir and property owner. No mention of me at all. The date? Just 1 week before Aaron died. I stared at the screen, heart racing. This was it. The thing she had been trying to bury. The version she must have hidden in that folder I'd once seen in her tote. And the kicker? The document metadata showed it came from her computer, not Aaron's. Not a law office. Just, Madison K_drafts. I printed the file without touching a thing. Scanned it. Then sent it straight to Mr. Holt. With one short message, she forged his will. And I didn't even flinch as I hit send. That morning, Holt called me before I even finished my toast. His voice was calm but serious when he said, "We're filing today." Right then, everything changed. We were no longer just waiting or defending ourselves, we were going on the attack. We had proof now. Proof that someone had forged documents, proof they meant to trick us, proof that legal papers were faked, and it all had a digital fingerprint that could be traced back. Hull walked me through what we had to do next. Step by step, he explained how we'd file a motion to stop anyone from changing the property title, ask the court to review the will, send a fraud alert through the probate court, and put a notice on the house to block any sale or refinancing that wasn't allowed. Then he said, "You don't have to serve her the court will." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Finally, someone else was standing up for me. I didn't have to keep pretending I was powerless in the house I helped pay for. By noon that day, Madison must have felt the change too. She got oddly friendly, offering to make lunch and asking if I wanted to help her shop for baby stuff. When I said no, she tilted her head and asked, "Are we good?" I just smiled and said, "We'll see." That afternoon, while she was out, I got a call from a process server. He said, "We'll be delivering some papers later today. Don't engage with her." I told him, "Trust me, I won't." So I sat on the couch, blinds open, and waited. Around 5 p.m., Madison pulled into the driveway in her new SUV, carrying 2 shopping bags. The moment she stepped on the porch, a man in a gray jacket got out of his car, walked up the steps, and said her full name clearly and politely. She stopped, confused, and said, "Yes?" He handed her a thick envelope and said, "You've been served with probate fraud and property injunction." She blinked, lips parted, and asked, "What the hell is this?" He just said, "You'll need to read it," and walked away. I watched her from the living room window. She held the envelope like it weighed a ton, staring at the seal. Then her eyes flicked toward the house, toward me. I didn't move or blink. I just sat there until she came inside, walking quickly, slammed the envelope on the dining table, opened it, and scanned the first page, then the second. I heard her whisper, "No, no, no." Then louder, "She's lying. This is all lies." She turned to me and shouted, "What did you tell them?" I stood up and said, "I didn't tell them anything. The documents did." She threw the envelope on the floor and stormed into the kitchen, muttering, "I'll fix this. This isn't happening." I said nothing because she wasn't talking to me anymore, she was talking to the world that had finally said no to her. That night, she didn't eat or talk. She didn't even come out of her room. The next morning, I found her pacing in the front yard, on the phone, whispering sharply, "Just get me a lawyer who knows how to bury this. Then, I don't care what it costs. She's just an old woman." I stood on the porch with my arms crossed, letting her know I heard every word. 2 days later, the court date came. It was a first hearing to decide if the will was real and who owned the deed. Madison showed up wearing a cream blazer and holding a fake ultrasound photo like a prop. Her lawyer started talking in a soft voice about grief and being a mother protecting her child. But Hull shut it down with cold, clear facts. He showed the judge side-by-side comparisons of Aaron's real signature and the fake one she had used. He showed proof from her laptop that she had opened and changed the documents herself. He even showed refinancing papers that left her out completely. And the biggest proof? The deed in my name, legally recorded and never touched by Madison in any way. When Hull said, "Your Honor, my client has been a co-owner of this property. From day one, the judge leaned forward, looked over the papers, and said, "Counselor, this is very clear." I saw Madison's whole body collapse, her shoulders slumped, her mouth twitched like she wanted to scream but couldn't. Then the judge said, "Temporary ownership freezes are lifted. Ms. Ellen keeps legal co-ownership. All eviction claims are cancelled. As for the will, it's suspected of fraud." After the judge talked about the investigation, Madison's lawyer whispered something quickly, and she looked at him like he'd betrayed her. I stayed calm and quiet because this wasn't about celebrating, it was about the truth finally being said out loud. As we left the courtroom, Holt turned to me and said, "Now we wait to see if she fights back or just leaves." When we got in the car, I checked my phone and saw an email from the court confirming that I had full ownership of the house. I smiled, not because I was happy she lost, but because I felt relief. Madison could make up stories and fake pictures all she wanted, but the law now knew who she really was. The next morning, the house was quiet, not calm, but tense, like the silence before a big storm. When I walked into the kitchen, Madison was already there. She was dressed all in black like she was going to a funeral. She sat at the table, staring at her untouched coffee and a legal pad filled with names and phone numbers. She didn't look up when I came in, just said, "You think you've won?" I poured my coffee without answering, letting her fill the silence with her own frustration. She kept going, "You think just because a judge believed your story, it's over?" Finally, I turned to her and said, "It wasn't a story, Madison. It was the law." That seemed to break something inside her. She stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You don't get to steal everything from me," she said angrily. I looked her right in the eyes and said, "You tried to erase me from a house I helped build, from a life I was always part of. You used a fake will and a fake pregnancy to do it." She froze, mouth open, then quickly tried to change the subject. "I was grieving. But it didn't work. We both knew the act was over." I said, "Pack your things. I'm giving you the same respect you never gave me. I'm not calling the sheriff yet." She opened her mouth like she wanted to yell, but then shut it, grabbed her phone, and stormed out of the house. I sat down and finally sipped my coffee, tasting it without fear or anxiety for the first time in a long while. The house stayed quiet for hours, not just on the outside but inside too, like the first breath after holding it underwater for months. Later, I went into Aaron's old room and closed the door. I sat on the edge of his bed, looking around at the empty bookshelf and the walls he had painted himself. I whispered, "We're okay now, baby. I promise." Then I opened his top drawer, the one I hadn't touched since the funeral, and found something I didn't expect. A folded piece of paper, written by Aaron, dated 3 weeks before he died. It started with, "If anything happens to me, I need you to know I'm sorry." My chest tightened as I read line after line. He wrote about feeling guilty and frustrated, how Madison had pushed him away from people, how he knew she was manipulative but was trying to fix things. He said he felt like he couldn't talk to me anymore because she made him feel like he had to choose sides. At the bottom, he wrote, "Don't let her take everything. This house was always ours, not hers. Do what you have to do, Mom." My hands started shaking, not from sadness, but from understanding. Even after he was gone, he had given me the final word. I took the letter, scanned it into my phone, and locked it away in my drawer next to the deed. By sunset, Madison came back, her face full of fire. "You'll regret this," she warned. "I'll go to the press and say you bullied a grieving widow." I smiled and said, "Then I'll show them the ultrasound dates, the will's metadata, and the letter Aaron left me." Her face went pale like she'd seen a ghost, because she didn't know about that last one. She whispered, "You're bluffing." I said, "Try me." Then she turned around and slammed her door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I didn't flinch. I just picked up the frame, put it back on the wall, and started making dinner like it was any other night. While the pasta boiled, I texted Hull, "Found a personal letter that really proves the motive. I'll send it over." He replied right away, "Send it." That night, for the first time in months, I slept with the window open, no door wedge, no spare key under the pillow, just the quiet and cool air. The next morning, I heard boxes being packed. By Sunday, the hallway outside Madison's room was lined with cardboard boxes, some with labels, some without, and some barely taped shut like she'd rushed to pack. I didn't even ask if she was really leaving because I already knew she had no more legal tricks left. Whatever bluff she was holding on to had fallen apart under the weight of court papers and her own mistakes. When she finally came into the kitchen, she didn't say anything at first. She just opened a drawer like she was searching for something that was never there. Then she looked at me and said, "I'll be out by Friday." I nodded, no smile, no sarcasm, just a calm nod like we were discussing plans, not ending a fight that had lasted a month. She added, "You can have your house back." I said, "It was never yours to give." That hit her harder than yelling ever could. She froze for a moment, then looked away like she wanted to say something mean but couldn't find the words. I walked past her and put the kettle on, not to be dramatic, but because I wanted tea. By then, I'd learned the best thing I could do was not react, just keep living like she was already gone. Later that afternoon, she had 2 friends over, their loud voices echoing in the hallway as they helped her carry boxes. I stayed in my room and heard them whisper things like, "She's crazy," and "How did you even live here with her?" I didn't answer because those questions weren't worth my time. The next morning, Madison made one last week attempt. She called Aaron's old friend, Kyle, and left a voicemail claiming I'd made the whole case up, that Aaron never wanted me in the house, and that I was using tricks to steal everything from her. What she didn't know was Kyle had already talked to me, had seen the court papers and the letter Aaron wrote. He texted me right after getting her message with just one line, "She's desperate." I didn't reply because there was nothing left to say. By Thursday, her car was packed with her last things. Her face was pale, makeup smudged under her eyes like she'd finally accepted this wasn't just a legal loss, it was personal, public, and final. That morning, she stood at the door holding her last bag and said, "You don't have to do this." I said, "Neither did you." She took a step back, like she expected me to lose it, to yell or cry or give her another reason to say I was the bad guy. But I stayed calm and still, watching her realize the truth right then and there. She had played every card, told every lie, and ended up exactly where she started, standing on a porch she never owned, with a future she couldn't sell. I opened the door and said, "You have until midnight." She asked, "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Anywhere but here." Then I closed the door, not to be mean, but because it was over. I watched her stand on the porch for a full minute, frozen, before she finally walked to her car, slammed the trunk shut, and drove away without looking back. I didn't cry or cheer. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt done. When the sun went down, I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and for the first time in months, I sat in the quiet, without listening for her footsteps or watching my back. She was finally gone. The house was mine again, clean and empty. I thought that was the end of it, until I walked into the living room and saw a small silver flash drive sitting on the coffee table. It wasn't labeled, just there like a trap. My stomach sank because Madison never left anything behind by accident, not after everything she'd done. Every move she made was planned. I stared at that flash drive for a long time, not touching it, not moving, knowing it was waiting for me. Dressed in fake sincerity, I thought about ignoring it, throwing it away, pretending it didn't exist. But after everything I'd been through, I wasn't going to leave this story with loose ends. So, I plugged the flash drive into Aaron's old laptop, the one Madison never touched because she said it smelled like dust and grief, and waited as the screen lit up. There was one folder, no password, with a single file labeled Open Me. Inside was a video, grainy at first, then clearer as the camera steadied. Madison sat in Aaron's home office, in the very chair I'd used to check my email that morning. She looked straight into the webcam and said, "If you're watching this, then I'm either gone or you think you've won." Her tone was calm but smug, like she was still playing chess in her head. She continued, "I did what I had to do, and maybe I crossed a line. But you were never supposed to stay here forever, Ellen. You were just a placeholder, a guest who overstayed her welcome." Then she leaned forward, her eyes hard, her voice dropping low. "Aaron wanted to ask you to leave before he died. He just didn't have the guts to say it." I paused the video, my jaw tight and heart racing. Even now, she was trying to plant doubt, trying to touch the one thing she could never take from me, my bond with Aaron. I hit play again. She said, "I told him we could build something if we had space, if he could finally let go of the past. But he was weak. He couldn't cut the cord, so I had to do it for him." She smiled like that was some kind of victory, as if isolating Aaron from me was an act of love instead of control. She ended the video with, "You can keep the house, Ellen, but you'll never forget this." The screen went black, and I sat there in the silence, not angry, not surprised, because that was always her, cruel, controlling, needing the last word. But what she didn't know was that I already had the only thing that mattered, Aaron's handwritten letter. The one she could never fake or erase. The one where he said, "I'm sorry," and told me the truth she spent months trying to bury. I pulled the letter from my drawer and held it beside the frozen image of Madison on the laptop screen. I felt nothing but peace. Because in the end, it wasn't about proving who was right. It was about surviving long enough to see her lose control. I ejected the flash drive, tossed it in the trash, and deleted the file from the laptop, not because I was afraid of her lies, but because I didn't need reminders anymore. The war was over. The house was quiet. Every room was finally mine again. That evening, I unpacked the last of my things from the boxes she'd once labeled to remove. I put Erin's photo back on the entryway shelf, lit a candle in the kitchen, and sat alone at the table, not lonely, just still, present, and free. As I sipped my tea and listened to the silence that no longer held tension or fear, I looked out the window at the porch she once tried to claim and whispered, "My house. My rules." And I smiled, because for the first time since the funeral, I could breathe in a space that belonged entirely to me, not because I fought for it, but because I never let her take it.